Good afternoon. Welcome to 10 Things to Know Before Your Next IEP Meeting, brought to you by Christopher Tiffany and Jana Morell of Raising Special Kids. My name is John McDermott, and I work for the Institute for Human Development in Flagstaff, Arizona. And we are happy to collaborate with Raising Special Kids to deliver this webinar via the Adobe Connect web conferencing platform. I have a few general housekeeping tidbits to share. And then I'll pass it over to Christopher and Jana. This is a listen-only webinar, so please utilize the chat pod for questions or comments. We will be recording this webinar for archival purposes, and at different times you'll see the file share pod appear. It's this pod up in the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to take it off the screen now, and I'll hand it over to Christopher and Jana. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, John. I first want to thank you, John, for partnering with us. It's been very helpful in letting us get to this point, which is our very first webinar, parent training webinar that we're presenting, and we thank you for that. My name's Chris. I'm the Director of Family Support and Education for Raising Special Kids. And again, this is 10 Things to Know Before Your Next IEP Meeting.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jana Morell, and I too am the Director of Family Support and Education at Raising Special Kids.
Great. Okay, so before we kind of jump into the training, we wanted to talk a little bit about Raising Special Kids and how we function within the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. IDEA Part D, among other things, establishes funding for agencies that help parents of children eligible for special education. The idea being really that if parents have a place to go to understand their rights, role, and responsibilities in the process, they're going to have the tools they need to collaborate and participate appropriately in their IEP meetings. And should any disagreement arise, parents will understand really how to appropriately disagree and utilize dispute resolution options, both formal and informal. Parent Training and Information Centers, or PTIs, are generally nonprofit organizations led and run by parents or family members of children with disabilities and or persons with disabilities.
Raising Special Kids is the PTI, or the Parent Training Information Center for the state of Arizona, and our mission is that we exist to improve the lives of children with the full range of disabilities from birth to age 26 by providing support, training, information, and individual assistance so families can become effective advocates for their children. So, what is an IEP? An IEP is an individualized education program that all children found eligible for special education have. Special education is specially designed instruction to meet the unique needs of the child. That is why we use the word individualized. An eligible child is entitled to what's called a free and appropriate public education, or FAPE. A FAPE looks differently for every child, so a team of people, the IEP team, determines the appropriate services and supports necessary for the child to make progress in school. The IEP document itself should reflect the agreements the IEP team made in the IEP meeting that outlined the individualized education program for the child and what that child's FAPE, or free and appropriate public education, looks like.
Okay, so we're going to start with some foundational information. The last slide was also foundational information, but think of the IEP with these first 4 bullet points. Okay, this document really is a document that should tell us, where we are right now as a team, where the child is right now, where we're going, what we need to get there, and in what environment. So as we go through the training, keep these 4 points kind of in the back of your mind as we go through the components of the IEP. Now, the next 5 bullet points are just things that we want you to also remember going through. Keep in mind that the IEP is meant to be a strengths-based plan that we, the team, can really build from. So again, it shouldn't be a document that just has all of the child's needs listed. We should have the child's strengths as well. And it really should be based on the child's strengths. Objective versus subjective. The IEP should have objective information about the child that is supported by data. So one of the examples that I read was that Barry currently reads 40 correct words per minute at a third grade reading level, which tells us a little bit more than Barry's not reading as fast as his peers. Another example that would address maybe functional skills would be Barry transitions from the playground to the classroom 2 out of 5 days per week appropriately without physical or verbal confrontation with peers is maybe a little bit more objective than Barry has a hard time with transitioning back to class after recess. Subjective information like Johnny is a very sweet boy is certainly okay. However, ask yourself, does it fit with the 4 points above? How will sweetness allow Johnny to learn phonics? Almost every IEP is going to have subjective information in it, and that's okay, but where we run into problems is when there are only subjective statements. Okay, so again, just a piece of foundational information to keep in mind. When we're talking about outside information provided by the parents always has to be considered, but not necessarily accepted by the IEP team. And when I mean outside information, I'm talking about medical reports, maybe information provided by a habilitation provider or an outside speech therapist. An example of this would be perhaps a child's pediatrician recommends the child have an iPad at school. The team really needs to consider that recommendation, but just like a teacher can't prescribe medication for the child, a physician can't prescribe educational programming. That's the function of the IEP team. Okay, let's talk about the idea of consensus. The IEP team, in which the parent is an equal participant, is tasked with coming to a consensus on decisions affecting the child's education and in the development of the IEP. Coming to a consensus is really the responsibility of all team members, even though they represent different roles or different positions. When the IEP team cannot reach consensus on an item or a number of items, ultimately the school has the authority to put their program in place, and the parent has the right to dispute resolution. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. First page to the last page. That bullet point really is inserted in foundational information to describe, basically to say that in Arizona, there is no state-approved format for an IEP. Districts and charters IEPs look differently. A child that transfers from Tempe Union High School District to Phoenix Union High School District may have 2 documents that look different. They will all have the same components. But the point of this bullet point is that from the first word on an IEP to the last word, if there's information in there, it's all good. So an example, if there's an explanation of a child's use of a communication device, that may live in a consideration of the child's assistive technology needs, or it could live in the consideration of communication needs. It doesn't really matter where it lives as long as it lives in the IEP somewhere. Okay, moving on to the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. That acronym PLAAFP up there, you might see that. Think of the PLAAFP as a snapshot of where the student is right now, both academically and functionally. Because how do we know where we're going if we don't know where we are, right? The snapshot of the student should be stranger-proof, meaning that if a family decided to pick up and move from Arizona to, say, Colorado, teachers and staff in Colorado would have a good idea of what the child's strengths and educational needs are and how the previous school was meeting those needs. The PLAAFP should contain input from teachers, and that could be strategies used in the classroom that help the child learn, input from parents, strategies used in the home and the community, objective data from recent evaluations, As we discussed in the last slide, keep an eye out for subjective information, as the PLAAFP is a section that is where subjective information most commonly shows up. The PLAAFP should also have current academic strengths and functional needs, so where the child is academically, generally in reading, writing, and math, and specific skills the child is deficit in. The PLAAFP should also address current functional strengths and functional needs, so how the child functions throughout the day, and functional skills that may need to be developed to promote independence, so things like social skills, behavior, appropriate peer interaction. In addition to all those things, there should be some objective information from the most current evaluation as well.